Hello, everyone, and welcome to the VectoScalar Tech Talk show. And in this show, we invite thought leaders, technical leadership from various companies and from the industry to share their insights that what is happening new in the industry. Just to give you a short introduction about what VectoScalar all about. So VectoScalar Technology is a technology pioneer serving large enterprises to startups and helping them achieve business growth by enabling digital transformation through software, web, mobile app, legacy app modernization, cloud migration, and cloud consulting. The team at VectoScalar has expertise in managing enterprise applications with millions of users from ideation to MVP and to launch. Now, in today's session, we are going to have our guest speaker, who is Suman Kumar Suman, Senior Technical Architect at VectoScalar Technologies, and he is going to cover the key points for the success of large-scale enterprise software application. And with that, I would like to invite Suman Kumar to our show.
Hello
Welcome,
everyone.
Suman.
Hello everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a quick background about Suman. He is senior technical architect at VectoScalar Technologies, a total of 11 plus years of corporate experience, delivered many enterprise applications, and worked on technologies including AWS, IoT, React.js, Native, Java, Node.js, and many more. He is among the company's first employee. And now I would like to hand over the session to Suman to share his expertise that how companies can build outstanding enterprise software development.
Yeah. Thank you, Vikas. So thank you for the opportunities. And hello everyone. So I am Suman, and I'm working with VectoScalar from day one, and now it's been more than 11 years. And VectoScalar is a software consulting firm. So we build softwares for different kind of agencies and large scale enterprise applications as well. So we have expertise in different domains from automobile to healthcare to gaming and all different kinds of systems and hierarchies. So we have gained experience in multiple domains and different systems that are used to build a large scale enterprise software development. And that is the topic for today's talk. So we will deep dive into this. So let's get into the presentation itself. So we will talk about the large scale enterprise software development, the key points, challenges, and other things that comes in the way. So let's move forward. So before deep diving into any of the topics or any of the points, so I will just wanted to quote a famous quote from the Pete Seeger. So he's a famous American musician, and he said that any darn fool can make something complex, but it takes a genius to make something simple. So whenever we are talking about big enterprise application architecture or design, so we should not always want it or want to make it complex, but it should be simple, scalable, and maintainable. So yeah, that's the topic. So let's deep dive into the things. So we will be covering two aspects. The first one is challenges, and other one is key points. So moving forward. Okay. So now you see the few points that I'm going to discuss about the challenges. So when we talk about the challenges, if you see the points like architecture, it should be microservices or monolithic, cloud agnostic or not, what DB we should use, you should think that why these are challenges. These are very simple. So it's always means sometimes the answer is very simple. Yes, microservice is better, SQL is better. We should go with cloud agnostic thing. So it sounds good. It sounds okay, but sometimes when you actually deep dive into the points and when you actually decide what and which one to use, then it's really challenging. So let's deep dive into few of the points, then we will check means why it is challenging and how. So let's cover our the first point, microservice with monolith. We all know microservice is better, it is scalable, but it comes with its bottleneck as well. It gives more development cost, more infrastructure cost, more maintenance cost. Means if something is breaking, it is very hard to debug the problem in microservice architecture because we have a lot of services, you have a lot of logs to check. So that is tricky. So is it really need to build with microservice or not, that you need to think when you are building enterprise application, especially suppose for startups. So you need to ask yourself, is there any independent service that is scalable separately, then we should go with microservice or not. Means is all the flows running on dependent on each other. So is that really a microservice architecture or monolith? So you need to ask yourself, you need to ask your business pattern, and whatever modules you are building, you have to questions from those patterns and the user flows. Only then you will be able to decide it should be microservice or not. Sometimes we also mix the approaches. So like microservice says that each and every service has independent DB, right? So each and there should be a segregation between each and every services. But to save the infrastructure cost, what we do that we deploy all the infrastructures on a single host, on a single machine, or we just mix the DBs, those things. So then you say and again ask the question, same question: is it really a microservice or not? And is it better, is it good, no, or wrong? So sometimes right or wrong is nothing, but you have to ask yourself, your business, your modules, and your question, and you need to decide, is it a microservice or monolith or mix, or what should we follow? You can also mix serverless or cloud features to decide. So instead of going with strictly monolith or strictly microservice, you can also mix something like lambdas and other trigger services. So to make, so it may not be perfectly monolith, it may not be perfectly microservice, but you can build on that. So ask these questions before deciding the things. If we go to the next topic, that is the system should be cloud agnostic or the cloud native. Both approach comes with its pros and cons, right? So if you go with cloud agnostic, then basically you have to bear a more development cost, but it will give you a flexibility of porting from one cloud to another cloud. But at the same moment, you will not be using specific cloud managed services that will lower your maintenance cost and DevOps cost, right? So you have means it is very rare in the software pattern that you change your cloud provider. If you are building with AWS, 90% probability is that you will be means deploying your application and remaining on the AWS only. You will not move to Azure or GCP. But sometimes people wants to deploy on more than one cloud, then you can build with agnostic. Otherwise, you can use features that is native, right? So cloud native. So even if you talk about AWS, it gives you a measure different managed services like DynamoDB, let's say, or different queues, SQS. So those are managed by AWS. So if you are just building with cloud native, you can go with that, right? So again, it's not any good or bad, means cloud agnostic is good or cloud native is bad. No. So again, based on your pattern and practices and your architecture, you can go with cloud native or with cloud agnostic as well. Okay. Moving to another very common thing, database. So whenever we start designing, we need to choose which database we to use. Uh, and as per the pattern in our industry, SQL is default, and it covers more of the use cases, mostly each and every one. Like because each and every data is hierarchical, there is no any kind of data that is not hierarchical unless it is just a part of those data, right? But you can try other solutions as well, right? There are different other kinds of database like Mongo or key value space database like DynamoDB, real-time data databases, Elasticsearch, and other type of databases as well. When we go with the cloud thing, it also provides assets on the existing database like Aurora. So this is just kind of SQL, but it gives you additional features, right? So you are building cloud native application, you can go with this as well. But whenever you are choosing, so do not go with the default or one pattern that is fitting to all your problems. No, if you are really you if you are building a application that you want really to scale, then you need to pick a database specific to use case. Each and every service can use different kind of database. It's not required that if you pick SQL, then each and every services and everything should use SQL only. No. So check your design patterns, check your access patterns. In DynamoDB, this is very common that before building a schema, just check your access pattern, how you are trying to fetch the data, how you are trying to get or put the data. So based on those patterns, you will be able to decide what all database you need to use. And again, it's just not like graph database is very tempting that you can get all the relations very easily. So you need to just use that. No, you need to ask, you need to check patterns, only then you need to decide. So that's on the database. And again, now this is a kind of summary of what we discussed till now. Like your architecture should be dependent on your user scale and on the type of the features that you are going to build. Everything cannot build like an Amazon or Facebook at the first level, right? whenever some startup comes to build some softwares, like they always wants that this software should be scalable, should be maintainable, and the response time should be milliseconds. Everything is fine. But if you compare with Facebook, with Amazon, or with Google, so see how their team is working, how big their team is, how big their infrastructure is, right? So you cannot expect a simple team to build those kind of features. You can build, means it's not a limitation, but you will have to spend a lot on infrastructure, on the development team, and everything all sort that is necessary to build those kind of things, right? And if you are trying something, if you are building a startup, then it's not wise to invest much in those areas, right? So you should decide your MVP based on your feature, or the key points, or the areas that you want to focus more, and you should build on that. And once that is built, then let it evolve based on the user response and other, right? So your model should be sustainable. It's not like you just build all the microservices, you break down in very small microservices. You started a several EC2 machines, 2022 large EC2 machines, and just bearing the cost, right? So it's not wise to build those kind of architecture. Although that is very much scalable, very much means maintainable, right? But you have to put a lot of effort and a lot of cost in that, right? So is that wise? Is that good or not? So again, there is no clear bifurcation of good or bad. So you need to build your architecture based on your need. So what you need, okay? So let moving to another type of services. So something that you do not build, those are third party services. You use them, right? There are several things like auth, we use Firebase, and we have Okta, Keylock, everything. So if you are implementing ecom, you do not need to really build everything. You can go with Shopify or WooCommerce, right? But everything comes with its own limitation and own way of uses. So if you start tweaking them, and if you do not use them properly, then it may be a pain for you, right? So just take example of ecom, right? So Shopify provides a hosted solution at the headless CMS. So you can call the headless ecom as well. So Shopify gives these APIs and you can use as it is. But WooCommerce, you have to host it, maintain it, right? So you have to deploy it. So you will be responsible for the deployment and maintenance, but not for the Shopify. But once you grow, if you start getting customers, then you have to pay to the Shopify, right? But WooCommerce is open source. So everything has means pros and cons, and you need to decide what you want and where you see yourself in near future, not in long future but in the near future. So you can pick those services only based on that. Then only the your architecture will be sustainable and maintainable. So the question is, do you need one? So if you're getting any third party services, you need to ask yourself, are you do you really need this? Do you want to build this on your own, or you want to use as it is? And if you decide to go with any services, suppose I decided to go with Firebase for my authentication system, do not want to build that just to develop quickly and for better maintenance, right? So we need to evaluate its limitations as well. Sometimes what we do is that we pick a services just based on its features, because some features are very tempting, like Pusher or any other libraries. When you get its advertisement page, it gives you a lot of tempting features, but sometimes some limitations are hidden, or it is not just directly visible, and you cannot just go or check the limitations when you are in development phase. So that comes later. So you have to spend a good amount of time in checking the limitations and the quotas of some libraries as well, whatever you are going to use. Means, will you be able to ever port from that libraries to another or not, right? So those kind of features. So you need to take care of those while deciding, because once you build something, it is very difficult to change, or you have to put a lot of effort to change those libraries, right? And even it is not wise. You are building first time, or you are building from scratch, you should pick the proper services. So that was the first part that I say as challenges. But now some key points that is not directly related to business, or this is not serving any business purpose, but this is very crucial from my perspective, that you should build in your application, and that will help you much. So let's take some examples of few key points. So first, if we discuss about the server driven architecture, almost means everything is server driven. You call REST API, get the data from the backend, right? But apart from that, you can put some points, some checks, some data, or some deciding factors on the server as well. You can call a configuration or something like feature toggle. So whatever feature you are developing, payment limits and anything, you can put those values on the backend, call on the launch of the system or cache it. So, and based on that, you implement those checks in your client. So if after releasing the application, if anything happens, you will be able to control that from the server as well. Sometimes you can give a better experience from server driven architecture as well, like changing the colors based on your geographical location or weather, right? So those things can be driven from the server, and you can toggle it on off and off. So that will help you much, and it will be clear in our further points as well. So if I just go with the post release scenarios, that is very important for the success of any enterprise application. So everything cannot be tested with your testers or the QA team at each and every geographical area, at each and every internet network, in each and every scenario, right? So you cannot predict the outcome, right? So in happy path it will work, that is very good, right? But some limit reached, some quotas reached, some internet fluctuation happen. So how your software is handling that, that is also very crucial, and you should be aware of that, and you should be prepared for that as well. So so if something shortcoming is happening or some breakdown is happening, like your server is going down for maintenance or anything, so that should be planned before you release. Like from the server driven architecture, you can get a data that our server maintenance time is suppose 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. You can display a banner or alert, something like that. So that will help your customers to identify what is happening, and he will not get frustrated as long as he is aware of what is happening. But if he is not aware, he may panic or he may leave the application, right? So it is very crucial to implement post release scenarios and how you will handle your failures if they are going to come. So then that will not be really a failure, but just a glitches that can be solved in few times, right? So similar pattern, there are few boundary conditions that we should must check, right? So when we deploy, like machine space, how much space is left on EC2, how much space is left on cache, what are the connection limits, is it going to reach when auto scaling happens, what are the limitations of our third party services quotas, if you are using SMS emails, what are the throughputs, those things we need to check. And we should have a counterpart. Suppose space is reached, then what will happen, right? If SMS quota or throughput is reached, then what will happen? So we need to plan our boundary conditions and edge cases before releasing the softwares. Although we cannot implement each and everything in 100%, but based on our experiences, we can implement at least few of them that we know from our experience, right? So that will just give a better experience to our customers. And in the same fashion, there is a proactive monitoring that we should do. So even after release, we should not just maintain our softwares, but we should implement some proactive monitoring that is not directly influenced by the business or the problem that you are solving using the softwares, but this is very crucial from the software or architecture standpoints, right? So if something is released, how we can monitor? So your customer should not come to you and tell that, hey, this is not working properly, right? So we should monitor that our system is working properly or not. Many times I have seen that we implement Sentry and Neuralink, but no one is going to look into that, right? Those are not correct, right? So implement some tools, Sentry, Neuralink, and any other tools, that those are very useful, but we need to use that, right? We should not wait for a ticket to get created for a crash, right? We should always, every morning or every on a scheduled time, let's check Sentry, what is new coming, and have a proactive result for that. We can check, means if something is really breaking, we can use server driven architecture to display some alert messages to our customers, and if not, we can just do a release. So those things we can do. Payments, finance, those are very things. So necessary checks, server driven checks we should implement. Even we should keep monitoring our payments and other stuff, what is going on. Even after release, just not wait that means your subscription is getting added, so the payment must have happened. So we should not believe that, and we should keep a fail-safe check, keep checking reports, generating reports timely, and keep a check on that. DP alerts, server alerts, those are very important things. Like, so we should not means just implement. AWS provide a very nice way to implement alerts and features, right? So we should not just go and add some alerts, because it will keep flooding your email and you will miss the important alerts. So you should add alerts and those parameters very wisely, right? So if that is coming, then you need to act. You should not ignore those things. So these are the few points. If we start taking into account, then that will help us to build software solutions in very seamless manner, and it will provide a very good customer experience as well. Now, before the closing things, what is a good architecture? So someone says perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but rather when there is nothing more to take away. So whenever we are building architecture or the large applications design, we should not always miss think what else we can add, what else we can add. No, we need to think what is necessary, what is important. So build your components in such way. So I think, yeah, that's all from my side. So this is not all, this is not exhaustive list, but this is what I prepared for this session. So yeah, that's all from my side. Because you are not audible, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Suman, for sharing such
Yeah.
beautiful insights. I'm sure the participants have got really got benefited out of it, and we see a lot of participation in the chat box, people saying hi, and there are a couple of questions. So moving forward, I would like to take a couple of questions. So Mohammad Afzal says, when should we use the memory cache DB like Redis or memcached?
When should we use memory cache DB like Redis or Memcache? Right. So this is again very specific case when we need to use a cache in the system. Like, so yeah, we can have a separate discussion on cache as well. But for just to answer your question, right? So cache are mostly used to reduce the time. So suppose where you get the data from the DB in most of the time on the backend, right? So to reduce the trip time, we use cache. So the thing that you are going to always fetch, you can keep that in cache, right? So suppose you need to get the user avatar always, right? So you should not poke the DB always, because the trip time to DB is always more than the trip time to Redis. So you can believe Redis as a your in laptop memory, something like hard disk or those things, right? So those trip time is very fast. So the data that you are fetching every time or most of the time, you should keep that in Redis instead of the DB. DB is primary source, data will be there, of course, but you can cache them in Redis and get the data from the Redis first. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for sharing and answering that question. We have the next question from Siddharth Satija. The question is, how do service discover and communicate with each other in a microservice-based architecture?
Yeah. Um, Again, right? So, Siddharth, so basically, when we talk about microservices or monolith, so this is a kind of theory, and how services discover each other, this is implementation. So a microservice architecture can be implemented in different ways, and based on that implementation, we can say how the services discover. So let me give some example. So we have some kind of reverse proxy as well, right? So all the API calls come to one proxy, and based on its route or path, it decides on which microservice or on which path or on which port it needs to trigger. So suppose an example, on a single machine, if two microservices are running, one on 8081 port and a second one on 8082 port, so the main HTTP will listen on 8080, the default port, or 443, and it will decide if the slash user is coming, then redirect to 8081, otherwise 8082. So this is how reverse proxy works. So this is one way of detecting microservices discovery. Another way, if you're going to use API gateway, then you can use API gateway as proxy. So you will have to implement some sort of gateway in front of all your services, or a proxy which will aware where to route your traffic. So this is some of the examples. There are other ways in Fargate and other stuff as well.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for answering that question. And before I move to the next question, there are a couple of more questions, and it shows that participants are really interested in the information that they are getting through this tech talk today. Uh, in case you have any other question to the participants, we have a couple of questions. You can also put your question in the comment box below, because that will help us understand your need, that what you are looking for. In case, due to the paucity of time, if we are not able to cover all the questions, but we will make sure that those questions are answered in the comments so that you get your answers. So with that, I would like to move to the next question. It does not specify the name of the person, but it says LinkedIn user. So, what factors should be considered in determining the scope of each microservice?
Okay, so this is a very good question because my first slide was on microservice and monolith, and I stated that is there is no actually a fixed rule, or there is no a fixed way in which you can decide it should be monolith or a microservice. And if you are going with microservice, what need to put in one and what needs to be put in another. But if you go by theory, so your microservice should be independently scalable. So whatever you are implementing in service, it can scale independently of each other services. So if you have 5 microservices, one is for user and another one is for other things. So if the loads comes, only user service will scale, not other. And to implement, this is the general rule or general, you can say theory behind the microservice. But to implement this, you should have independent DB, independent infrastructure supporting for those microservices as well. It should not be dependent on each other. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that question. Now I'll move to the next question. It's again from Mohammed Afzal. Is it a good practice to push the email notification in queue before sending to users?
So if you read about queue, means why queue is important, so it will make your system fail safe. So queue implement a mechanism where if your processor or whoever is reading the queue get fails, then your items will not get lost. So it is always advisable to use queue whenever you want to couple two or more microservices or more layers where you want to implement a fail safe checks, right? So means yes, we should implement a queue before sending email notifications as well, because in my sense some notification emails are very crucial like payment, right? So if it is in queue and if something bad happens, if your processor or throughput or limit anything raised, you can get alerts, you get to know that your system is not working and you can do the things, right? And even queue also helps you in managing throughput, right? So reading in batch sizes and processing one by one, right? So if you have a lot of customers, your queue will make ensure that your system remains scalable, right? So yes, queue is important and it can be used before email and notification or before notification service, I will say.
Thanks again for answering that question. So I have one question, but it's not mentioned in the chat there. So question is around the requirement gathering. You beautifully mentioned, Suman, that we should the when we are building an enterprise level application, we can't have every other feature in the MVP itself. So
Correct.
MVP should have all the basic features. So we should
Mhm.
take it from a growth perspective, that in the beginning we just focus on what we are building right away, knowing that what we'll build in futures. But how a entrepreneur, startup owner can get over this idea of, no, I should have everything in the first go itself? You must have worked on
So
many projects, so how to handle that situation?
yeah, there are means two different approaches. The first approach is just go with the crux that what you want to sell or what you want to build. And similarly, there is one another approach that says if you are hitting the market, then go with go once, means build everything, then go once, so that your customer do not feel that something is missing or something is not available, right? So that depends on what kind of system you are building, right? So that's business needs to decide. So if you are going to something new, means if you are something evolving, let's say about AI, right? So chat gpt on the first go itself isn't giving everything, right? It's just question and answer tools. And now we can see that every sort of image processing, generative AI, and everything is coming and popping up, right? So in similar way, if you are going with something new that is new to market, or if you are launching a special type of features, suppose you are building a social media application in which you are focusing much on images and you have done a very inspiring thing with AI on the images, then focus on that. Means reply to the comments, notification, those things can be additive, right? Because that is not your crux. But if you are in competition to something, and if you are going to build that is already there, but you are just building in any another way or with some new way of presentation, right? Then you need to give everything, because your customer uh, have already tested that things in other softwares, right? So that again depends on what things you are building or what you are selling. If you are building a whole system as to sell, then you need to build whole, right? If you are selling a feature, then you need to focus on that feature.
Okay, so getting that clarity that what we are going to, what is our go to market strategy and where we are heading towards should be the first and foremost thing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are getting accolades for your amazing session. People are saying it aloud. So thanks, Suman, for doing that. I see another question in the chat box here from Rohit. What can be done? So it is related to load testing, but see if you want to take up in this session or probably in some other future session. What can be done to simulate load testing using automation testing tools?
The question is not very much clear. So, what can be done to simulate load testing? This is one part. So, there are different tools in market that we can use to simulate load testing. But using automation testing load tools, that is not very much clear. So, there are several automation testing tools as well. You can build scripts and run on several platforms like browser stacks and other stuff, right? So, those platform already provides you a way of providing load test and doing parallel testing, those kind of things. But the thing, key point from the architecture standpoints that I can say is whenever you are doing a load testing, you need to be aware where you are testing. You should not pick any environment that is shared with customer, or a demo is happening, or some means presentation or anything is dependent on that. Then you should not do load testing on that. And whenever you are doing load testing, you need to means that's altogether a different topic, but means what all data you are adding. Means if you are just running one data in loop, then that may not make very sense, means much sense. That will just test your server connection, nothing else. But if you really want to do a load test, you need to diversify your data and your connections, right? Geographical locations, and then there are several things that comes in picture for load testing. But to just answer, just have a separate environment, monitor it, and let's make sure it do not affects anything. Yeah.
Okay. With that, thank you, Suman, for being on our show. I'm must say that people will be having a lot of questions, but due to paucity of time, we need to conclude the session right now. Thanks for being here, and we'll look forward for more technical knowledge from your side that can help the industry to move forward. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
sure. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, friends, for joining this session today. So, this is your host, Vikas Jain, the growth head at VectoScalar Technologies and a curator of VectoScalar Tech Talk, a global speaker and author. And do share in the chat box that what kind of more topics that you want to hear in the upcoming sessions. So, what are the hot topics that are bothering you, the enterprise development, software development, mobile development, or what are the things that you think are important for your life? You can share in the chat box below, and we'll make sure that we gather the right experts in that field to make sure that you are having an amazing time and building world-class application. With that, signing off, your host Vikas Jain with from Vectoscalar Tech Talk. Bye bye.